Welcome to a special edition of Second City Sports Zoom style.
All right, Zoom style.
we gotta keep it going. Along with Sydney Brown, which is he, I am Lakeena Brown, which is me and she. You can follow me at Keena McGee on the Twitter and at Keena_McGee on the IG.
You can follow yours truly on the Twitter and the Instagram at SidKid80. Once again, at SidKid80. That's SIDKID80. That's SIDKID80.
You can also follow the show on WeAreRealRadio.com at War Media. We got a lot of great shows in the scope with Josh Hicks, among many others. You can follow on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. All the shows are there. Also, we're on YouTube. We can look up all those shows, all the previous episodes from our show. It's live, it's premiering, and just like, share, subscribe, and tell your friends.
Yes, do that, please.
And we're unapologetically fun, as Sid would always say. And we're actually going to be having a lot of fun here today in this special edition. This is our special Cubs preview. We got a couple of great guests here. We'll start with Brad Robinson, who is a radio news editor, also covers sports here in Chicago as well. Where can people follow you, Brad?
Twitter, at Brad Robinson 8.
And also someone who's been on Sid's other show, Dean Davis, also now that's Davis. He is the writer for Real Cubs Insider, also Bears Insider. Well, we should do this again with the Bears at some point, you guys, because I'm sure we got a lot to say about the Bears. But he is Evan Altman. Evan, where can people find you on the social media front?
There's only one of me, so I do not have 7 other people in front of me. So mine is just at B Evan Altman. There's no number. I don't have to differentiate myself there. You can find the site itself. We have an account at Real Cubs Insider on Twitter, or you can find us on Facebook, and then we have a YouTube channel as well. So just search Cubs Insider, and you're bound to find something out there.
Get all your Cubs, cool Cubs, scoop and news right there. So, gentlemen, let's just start with the basics here. Brad, I'll start with you. What are sort of like the real expectations for the Cubs this season? Because you're seeing all these different things. You got Joc Pederson, and they brought Jake Arrieta back into the fold, but yet they got a lot of young players. What should be fans' realistic expectations for them?
Well, I think this team is a lot more unpredictable than most of the teams we've seen over the past 5 or 6 years. The pitching rotation is questionable at best. I mean, what you got with Kyle Hendricks. He's a legit ace. He's very, very good. But after that, it's a whole lot of question marks. You don't have John Lester there anymore. You have a very different looking staff. And the bullpen has been a bit of a mess for a number of years now, and that really wasn't fixed either. So, I like the way their lineup looks. I like what Joc Pederson is. I like the way he fits into this roster. But that pitching, they're going to go as far as that pitching takes them.
Evan?
Yeah, I think I have to agree on a lot of those points. It does feel as though the lineup is more balanced than what we've seen the last few years, and that's something that has been noted by a lot of different people over the last few years, right? And even the Cubs themselves have said that. And I think there's more contact, there's a little bit less swing and miss. But as Brad said, the staff, it feels very deep, but that also is kind of like there's not as much at the top end, right? I mean, Kyle Hendricks, I don't want to defame him in any way, but the depth is created by, we don't have that top like that Yu Darvish where you're like, okay, I guarantee you down a lineup every 5th day. You have a lot of guys who on their game can shut somebody down. Can you do that consistently? The starters all look really similar. And then you've got bullpen guys who are somewhat untested. So I think, yeah, can they be very good? Yes. Will they, and can they do that consistently is really the key. And I think it's going to be interesting to watch one way or the other. Like, there is nothing dull about this team right now.
Sid?
You know what? It's for the Cubs team this year. It's like open up a fortune cookie, hoping you find some great news, and maybe you can overachieve a little bit. But I think it's the inevitable about when change is going to happen. Will it take place during the trade deadline on July 31st. I know we'll talk about that in depth as we go along. Will it happen there, or will it be delayed until this off season, whenever that postseason run ends, uh, or the season ends with no playoff berth? So I agree with both of you guys. It's kind of up in the air, but it should be a whole lot of fun. So, some fans may just have their ears and eyes covered already, but but we just gonna have to wait and see how this team performs as they get out of the gates here to start the year.
Yeah, you can remember our buddy Jason Pfeiffer, who's a big Cubs fan, guys. Like I can already picture him saying, "Okay, I'm I don't want to speak for him, but I think he's a little. I think he feels like the same way a lot of other Cubs fans feel. Like, okay, maybe they can contend for a wild card, maybe not, or maybe they could probably stay with the Cardinals, perhaps for the division, or maybe not. I mean, there's just so many variables and so many unanswered questions. But I guess, like you said, like you guys said, I mean, this is probably going to be part of the fun. Is the fact that we just don't know. And, so I think you got another question for the guys?
Yeah, so I want to start with that starting rotation. It's been announced as of this recording that Cal Hendricks will be the opening day starter. But as we all know, the changes were made to the starting rotation in this offseason. Yu Darvish was traded to San Diego. Of course, John Lester was not brought back. Who replaced those guys? We'll start off with Jake Arrieta. Brad, I'll start with you. I'll just get this out the way now for Cubs fans. You're not getting 2015, the first half of 2016, Jake Arrieta. You're not getting that guy. What can fans expect realistically from Mr. Arrieta in 2021, assuming that he stays healthy, if he could do that? Because that was his problem the last couple of years in Philly.
I mean, frankly, I can't believe they got that 2015, 2016 version of Jake Arrieta because it was so outstanding.
Yeah.
Just out of this world. But yeah, health is a big issue for him. He wasn't healthy in Philly, and it really showed in his performance and his numbers. Now, he's very comfortable in Chicago. He likes it here. Maybe that plays a little role in a little bit of a rebirth because, these guys are human beings and where they are matters and comfort matters. So maybe they get a little bit of a boost there, but overall, I don't think you can really expect him to be a top line starter like he was last time with the Cubs. I mean, he's a guy who, at his best at this point in his career, you're hoping he could be a legit number 3 type. But that kind of leaves you with Hendricks and Davies, who are two very, very similar pitchers, kind of at the top of that rotation, and you'd like to split them up with a guy that has different looking stuff, and Jake is that. So, there's hope that he could rebound a bit, but it's not going to be to the level, that Cy Young level that he was, 5 years ago.
What do you think, Evan?
Yeah, it's Arrieta's an interesting case for me because I think the one thing we saw from him, in addition to obviously being very, very good, right? That was at one point. He's a very, very proud man. And I think anybody has to get to this level of the game, you should have a certain level of confidence and even ego, if we want to call it that. But Arrieta's even been kind of resistant to some change in the past. And I think he experienced his mortality in Philly. He understood very quickly. And I think there was a reason he wanted to leave beyond money and everything else. I think Jake Arrieta wanted to prove to the world that he was not a product of the Cubs. He was not a matter of whether it be Chris Bosio or Joe Madden or anyone else. They didn't make him who he was. He made himself who he was. And so he could go prove that in Philly. Well, guess what? It didn't work out the way anybody thought it was going to. And I think he's maybe a little bit more open to some of the change. He's been very much you throw down in the zone, you locate the sinker low. Yeah. The Cubs as an organization are one of those that likes to throw the sinker high, to elevate that a little bit more. If he's willing to maybe take some of those things, make a few changes to his repertoire, I think we'll see a different Jake Arrieta, but one that's a lot better than what we've seen the last 3 years in Philly. And if he can do that, and again, I'm not saying he's got to change his entire repertoire, but if he could do that just a little bit and keep the control, because we saw that a little bit, that slider that was working so well in 2015, once everybody started realizing, wait a minute, don't swing at it because it's going to carry so far.
The marble.
And then we saw things kind of, he didn't get the strikeouts and he walked a few more guys. So, but I think he's that guy because otherwise we're looking at 5 righties, 5 guys who don't hit 95, assuming maybe Adbert Alzolay is more of kind of a swing role, if we assume Alec Mills and Trevor Williams. There are, as Brad said, similar looks you get. And Arrieta has the kind of stuff that's just a little bit different from those others. And I think how they incorporate that, it's like the Tampa Bays who have, 12 different arm angles from 12 different pitchers, all kinds of different stuff at you. With the Cubs, it's going to be very small incremental differences and beating you by pitching, not just by pure stuff. And that's the part where, again, it scares me a little bit because it really relies on execution to a grade. They're not going to fool a lot of people, right? They've got to execute every day, and it's going to be those three. But it is also at the same time, to me, and I'm a big nerd for pitching and the intricacies of it. So I love hearing the stuff with Tommy Hotovy working with Trevor Williams on fixing this thing with release point, or just a slightly different grip on the slider and how that gives a different look from what he's seen. So for one, I'm interested to see how they make it work. But I think Arrieta is a huge part of that, and his health will dictate a lot about what that rotation does.
By the way, Trevor Williams is a candidate for a guy that could really take a step forward. We've seen him have a really good year in Pittsburgh before. He's got really good stuff. I mean, that's a guy who I think could surprise a lot of people in the Cubs rotation.
Should be very interesting. Now, what about Joc Pederson, Evan? I'll start with you. I mean, he actually took less money to go to the Cubs instead of the White Sox. Sorry, Sid. But, how much of a big boost he can give to that lineup?
I'm really high on Pederson. And I liked him back in the day. Like when he came up and he was a hot shot rookie for the Dodgers, he's in the home run derby. He just comes across as one of those guys you kind of want to be around. Like if anybody hasn't seen it, go back and just Google Champ Pederson, Albert Pujols. Champ is actually Joc's older brother. He has Down syndrome, and Albert Pujols has a daughter with Downs and has been very active in that. And so Champ Pederson is saying he gets to watch his favorite player in the home run derby, and it's Albert Pujols and not his own brother. And that moment was really cool. So I thought, well, this guy seems like somebody who you'd kind of like to be around. And he's just immediately came into camp and just has this energy. And he, of course, these guys all want to be there, but when you choose, and we talked about that with Arrieta, as Brad mentioned. I mean, Trevor Williams' dad grew up as a Cubs fan, was an usher, and I think like a peanut vendor or something at Wrigley Field when he was younger. And so you've got this idea where guys are there because they want to be, not because they're getting a paycheck, not because that was the only team that offered them a deal. And Pederson, I think, the more I look at it, if you just looked at the box score numbers, you'd be like, well, this guy is Kyle Schwarber. He's the same. They're lefty batters. They play left field. Similar home run numbers. They strike out kind of a lot. They'll take their walks. But when you really dial into it, you say, well, but Pederson's done a little bit better against right-handed pitchers in general, which is mostly what he's going to face. The NL Central has a lot more righties, not many lefties. So you eliminate some of the platoon. He hits high fastballs better. That's an area, and a lot of people don't want to believe this or want to think it's too incremental. But we talked before about this lineup. The Cubs have struggled. The Dodgers knew this in 2017. The Dodgers knew the Cubs struggled with high fastballs. They destroyed them with high fastballs. Pederson was part of that team. He knew that. We heard it from Brandon Morrow when he came over. Everybody knows this. So Pederson does better against that than Schwarber did. He's a better defensive player in left field. And every one of those outs, maybe it's only 5 or 6 outs over the course of the season that he makes that Schwarber wouldn't have. It's probably more than that, but let's just say it's that. But then that helps Ian Happ to be better in center, and that helps Jason Hayward to be better in right. And if you can eliminate 1 or 2 big hits in 1 or 2 big games, that means the difference. Let's look back at 2018 when the Cubs lost game 163. Actually, they lost 162 to tie with the Brewers. They lost 163 to the Brewers. They lost the wild card to the Rockies. Had they scored 1 more run in any one of the previous 162 games to get a win instead of a loss, now you're talking about a team that gets a bye past the wild card. They win the division. That's a massive difference. So I know people want to say, well, what good does it do that he bats 10 points higher against these types of pitches, or that he might get them a few more outs and left? That's the difference. 1 run in 1 game could be the difference that splits that. And I think that's where Pederson can really elevate this lineup overall.
Yeah, I think when we look at the two stat lines between Schwarber and Pederson, there are a lot of similarities, but the similarities end with those specific numbers, right? If you look at the overall game, Pederson's a guy, he was a very highly rated prospect coming up, a natural center fielder. So naturally he has more range in the outfield. And like Evan said earlier, when you're talking about a pitching staff that's going to rely very heavily on contact, that matters a huge deal. So that upgrade in left field, just defensively, is going to make a big difference. Pederson's faster. He's a better base runner. So that helps offensively as well. And, this is a guy who, with the Dodgers, he struggled in platoon situations, so they made him a platoon center fielder. But that's an organization that had remarkable depth. They didn't have to wait for him to develop. Now Pederson's in a situation where there's not going to be anyone pushing him from behind as far as cutting his playing time. The job is his. So we can really see how he develops because the Cubs are in a position where they can kind of allow it to happen. I'm very high on him. I think that was just a remarkable signing. Cubs got really lucky with that one. Really lucky.
You're listening to our 2021 Chicago Cubs preview show presented to you by Second City Sports and War Media, along with Lakeena McGee, which is she. I am Sidney Byrne, which is me. We're joined by Brad Robinson and Evan Altman as we break down the Northsiders. Fellas, let's stick with that pitching staff and go to the bullpen. Closer Craig Kimbrel has improved as spring training has gone along. Of course, last year manager David Ross had the quick hook on him. Kimbrel actually improved a little bit toward the end of the season before their early exit in that wild card round against the Miami Marlins, I should say. Evan, I'll start with you. What do you think manager Ross's approach will be to Kimbrel this season? Do you think he'll give him a quick hook again this year, or do you think he'll stay with him, be patient with him, stay with him just a little bit longer? It depends on how the team is playing, obviously.
Yeah, I think there's a few factors there, and one of which, as you alluded to, he has looked a lot better lately. Significantly better. I was out at spring training just for a brief period, and when I saw him pitch, he was at 94. He touched 95 maybe once, gave up a ton of hard contact. Craig Kimbrel cannot live in the mid-90s and be successful. It's not going to happen. He's got to have the velo up, and more than that, he's got to have the ride or rise, whichever one a ball physically cannot actually rise. So I always like to point that out. But to have that really tight backspin on a high fastball and to let it ride high in the zone, and that's the major difference we saw. When Kimbrel is working at his best, he's hitting the top of the zone with high 90s, and then he's dropping the curveball in the zone. What we saw a lot from him, especially last year in an abbreviated, I guess both of his seasons with the Cubs have been abbreviated, but he was just piping fastballs down the middle way too often, and then the curve couldn't find the zone, and hitters could just sit back and just wait. And they knew that once they could sit dead red on a fastball, they knew it was coming right down the pipe, and they could drive it hard the other way. Or not any way they wanted, really. But if what we saw from him the last time, he was out there touching 98, he was up at the top of the zone, the curveball had bite. If that's the Kimbrel we get, and if it's repeatable, and I think it scared me a little bit when David Ross came out a couple weeks ago now, a week and a half or so, and said they've already noticed some mechanical flaws. They need to get him in the pitch lab. To say about your closer that we are concerned about his mechanics, and this is not a young guy, although he's still only 32. I think a lot of us think about Craig Kimbrel as being this like 38, 39-year-old guy because he's been around forever. He's only 32, so we're not talking about a guy who should be all of a sudden dropping off by 5-6 miles an hour. I mean, he's got plenty of gas in the tank. It's just a matter of, can he dial in the mechanics? We saw it the last 8 games of last season, no walks, 13 strikeouts. If he can be that guy, they should give him all kinds of slack and only back off if they need to. But I do like what we've seen. If Rowan Witt gets healthy, we've seen some really good things so far from Jason Adam is a guy who I think we're going to see a lot of. Brandon Workman is a guy who's gotten saves for the Red Sox in the past. That's somebody else who can step in there. So the Cubs have, and maybe even if you look at Shelby Miller is another guy who Ross has used in kind of some one-inning situations. They have a lot of veteran pitchers and a lot of guys who may be capable of picking up that slack. So I think when you're looking at that setup, 6th, 7th, 8th inning, they have plenty to back him up. So I think he'll get enough slack if he continues, but I'm not as concerned if we run into another situation like we've seen in the past where maybe things aren't as pretty for him.
Yeah, I agree with Evan on all of that. You know, with Kimbrel, a big key is if he is losing a little on the velocity, or if he has games where that velocity isn't there, is he going to be able to make adjustments and find ways to get guys out in another fashion? I mean, and that's the same story with Jake Arrieta or any veteran pitcher, really. You know, how do you get guys out when the speed of your fastball is dropping, right? So, I mean, if Kimbrel's up in the upper 90s, it shouldn't be a problem, but you know, you got to keep an eye on that because he's struggled to hit that level over the past couple seasons, and there are other options. And again, you have the Cardinals, who are a much different looking team than they were the last few years. So there's more competition in that division. So, you know, the Cubs can't really afford to ride out bad bullpen losses like they've been in a position to do the last few seasons.
So, you know, going with going back to the hitting for a second, you know, David Bodie and Nico Horner, we saw flashes of them, especially with Horner last year, kind of taper off a little bit as the season went on. Do you think that, especially with Horner, he kind of started, get back to the stride that we saw early last season?
Well, he's looked mighty good in spring training so far, and he has bulked up a lot. He looks like a different guy, I mean, just physically. So, yeah, I mean, if he can carry what he's doing this spring into the regular season, the Cubs have a pretty good second baseman situation. And Bodie, I mean, Bodie's a really nice, versatile player to have on your team. He can come off the bench without any problem. He can play third base. He can play second base. You know, you can put him in different spots. He's a solid glove man. So Bodie's more of that utility type guy, I think, and Nico really profiles as a decent starting second baseman. So you just hope that what we're seeing now isn't a spring training illusion, and he really has, really is starting to develop the way the Cubs thought he would develop.
Yeah, I still have my concerns about Horner, and I want to be wrong about him. I'll say that right now because I know that he was called up when he was as a result of like literally every other shortstop in the organization being hurt. Because he was a guy who dealt with a broken hand in 2019. He was never supposed to have been called up in the first place, but he was, and he did really well. But as they admitted, a lot of that was because none of the pitchers knew him yet, and he was going out there being aggressive, just trying to jump on fastballs early. Don't get deep in the count. Don't let major league pitchers beat you. Jump on a fastball, go. And they wanted, he probably would have been sent down to begin the 2020 season had it been a normal year. It wasn't a normal year. They needed the most talented players they could get. He was up there, but he got exposed. Again, working those deep counts. So yet again, I wanted to see, can you get this guy some time in the minors, let him grind those out? He's kind of forcing the issue again. But as Brad said, is this a matter of, again, you're facing a lot of spring training pitchers who are looking to locate fastballs early. You can be aggressive with that. You don't need to use a B-hack. And that once we get into the regular season and you stop seeing that when guys are breaking out the really nasty stuff, when you're forced to work that 5, 6, 7 pitch at bat and then fight off that slider away rather than watching somebody pump a fastball, that does give me pause. At the same time, this is a really intelligent baseball player. As Brad mentioned, I mean, look at the pictures of this guy. And he has to have added 15 to 20 pounds at least over. And he looked skinny early, but he was always a pretty muscular player. And I think, again, you're talking about somebody who's got professional development. So I love the ceiling for him. I am a little bit afraid of the floor, and I sincerely hope that he proves me wrong.
Yeah, when looking at spring training numbers like this, it's always important to remember that pitchers in spring training are working on things that they would not bring into a regular Major League Baseball game until they're ready. And it's so much of it is experimental, and you have some rarefied air in Arizona as well. So that kind of messes with numbers a little bit too. So it's really more about process than numbers. But when you put up numbers like Nico's put up so far and like Pederson has put up so far, it's hard to not look at them and say, well, that's encouraging.
I want to ask you guys about Anthony Rizzo. We all know about Kris Bryant, Javi Baez, and Rizzo Contreras. They're all one extensions. We'll get to those guys in a few minutes. But I want to start with you, Evan. Talk about the impact that Anthony Rizzo has had on this franchise. And do you think it's a good idea for Cubs management to give him an extension to help this franchise make a transition into the next group that hopefully could be competitive in a short term in the coming years.
Yeah, I think for as much credit as John Lester gets, and rightfully so, for kind of ushering in a new era of Cubs baseball, Lester was a guy from the outside who again, he came in, he believed in what the Cubs were building, and that really signaled to the rest of the world that, the Cubs are legit now. They're here. Obviously, Rizzo had been around for a while before that, but he was kind of that guy. Again, he was the one, Theo Epstein regretted letting him get away from Boston, but Hoyer was the one who picked him up, and so you knew both of those guys wanted to bring him back around. And it was about more than just his talent, because they're not putting a C on anybody's chest in Chicago yet on the north side, but Rizzo would be the guy who wears it. Yeah. Rizzo is, and I think it's been cited many times before, but when he basically offered to go fight the entire Reds dugout in Cincinnati, like, okay, this guy, like, he's, he'll put the team on his back, right? He will put the team behind him. Come on, get behind me. I will slug my way, again, whether it's with the bat or my fist, through anybody who's in our way. Let's go. And so from the emotional standpoint, I think what he brings is something beyond the stats that can't really be quantified. And that's the kind of guy that you want to have, whether it's a transition to a new competitive window or just kind of as someone who defines what the team is. As that guy you can kind of say, well, who are the Cubs? Okay, it's Rizzo. That's what he brings. And then we can kind of define the team from there on down. At the same time, I think we've seen them make some decisions so far that kind of set motion to the side and say, you know what, we don't care. Like, hey, John Lester was beloved. We don't have enough money to re-sign him. Yu Darvish made himself into just a phenomenal character that everybody loved. We're going to trade him. And so I think from a business standpoint, do the Cubs feel they've got somebody who can replace him? But I think then at the end of the day is, who do you have coming up? Do you have another guy who could take over and play first base at that level, even without the leadership? The answer to that is no. And so I think for both sides, it would make a lot of sense for him to stay around, because his value to the Cubs and their value to him, I think, would be greater unless he were to say, and I know this has been out there with some, unless he said, hey, I want to finish out my career close to home. I'm going to end up settling down again in Fort Lauderdale, Miami area. I'll go play for the Marlins and kind of be their captain for a few years at the end. I don't want to scare anybody, but I think that would be the only other, if I'm Anthony Rizzo, that's the only other possibility I would ever consider other than re-signing with the Cubs. But it makes too much sense for both sides to make something work in Chicago.
Yeah, I mean, when Theo Epstein brought in Rizzo, that was kind of like the first piece of the rebuilding of, for a championship caliber team. And he brought him in specifically to be the face of the franchise. And that's what Rizzo's become, right? He's beloved by fans, all the charity work he does. The guy is Teflon in Chicago, and he's earned that. And so I think if you're looking at what an extension would cost and the value to an organization, when you're talking about Anthony Rizzo, it's a different discussion than when you're talking about anybody else on that team. Because if there's going to be a statue outside of Wrigley Field commemorating that 2016 team, it's going to be Anthony Rizzo. He's the one who raised the flag. He's the one that carried the trophy out onto Wrigley Field after they won the championship, on opening night the next night. He is that guy, and they have made it great efforts to make sure everybody knows he's that guy. So I would think at some point they'll come to some kind of agreement. I just don't see how they would be better apart than together.
A few more minutes with Evan Altman and Brad Robinson here in our Cubs preview and our special edition of Second City Sports presented by War Media. Let's go to the broadcast side for a second here, you guys. Len Casper, after 16 years, leaves the Cubs TV booth, goes, cross down to the White Sox. Boog Sciambi, veteran, ESPN guy, been covering baseball for years, calling baseball games. For the Cubs fans who haven't heard him and JD together, they sound great together so far. They sound terrific. What can Cubs fans expect from Boog Sciambi? Because he's very open. He said, "Look, I'm gonna say stupid stuff." So I'll let you guys elaborate. I'll start with you, Brad. What can Cubs fans expect from a Boog Sciambi, Jim DeShae's booth?
Well, I mean, Boog is an absolute pro. He's one of the best in the business. He can get a little silly at times, which is great for baseball because there's a lot of time to be a little less serious. It's not like broadcasting a football game. I think Boog is a really nice addition for the Cubs. It stinks that it's at the expense of Len, because Len was an awesome fit with the Cubs, and I loved listening to him. And I like Len as a person. He's a really good dude. And I don't know Boog personally, but Boog's good. I mean, Cubs fans are really going to like him.
Yeah, I think, and I'm trying to struggle with how to say it, but Boog gets it. Mm-hmm. If that makes it, like, he knows exactly what he's walking into. He's not trying to be Len Casper. He's not trying to be anybody else. He is who he is. And we're talking about a guy who's got, and he and Casper actually worked together with the Marlins back in the day. So they've known each other for a long time. Boog's done a ton of Cubs games with ESPN, but he's also covered basketball. He's covered several other sports. I mean, you're talking about a guy who worked with, and I remember watching some of his broadcasts with Bill Walton on the Maui Invitational college basketball, and we've seen Jason Benetti on the South Side work with Bill Walton. So you got to have like a certain degree of goofiness to be able to handle Walton, but you've got to play the straight man to him as well, and to be able to kind of do all those things, I think is really interesting. And again, you're talking about a guy who's maybe a little less. Len Casper was he had that dry wit and a bit of that deadpan sarcasm at times. I think Sciambi is a little bit more animated in that regard, and so I think there are some differences there. But he definitely plays off JD really, really well, and I think we're going to have fans are going to have a lot of fun with it. And I say, just don't expect it to be this dry series. Expect it to be entertaining. They're going to bring you something other than the game itself.
Right.
And if you enjoy that, then I think you're in for a really, really good time.
As you guys know, April 1st is opening day against the Pittsburgh Pirates at Wrigley Field. Across Major League Baseball, the capacity is between 20 and 35% for fans attending the games. Of course, here in Chicago, the Cubs will start first. They'll have just a shade over 8,000 fans at the friendly confines. I want to ask you both this. How important is it for these teams to start making money from the gates, even though we're slowly trying to get back to normalcy as more vaccines are starting to roll out? And when do you guys think we'll be at full capacity? Will it be this summer? Will it be after the All-Star break? I'll start with you, Brad.
Well, I'd expect full capacity maybe next year. I especially in Chicago, where the rules are a little more stringent than in other places in the country. So I don't think they're eager to jump into just letting go of all the safety precautions. So I'd be surprised if we got to 100% this year. As far as how important it is to the team to make money, I mean, you're talking about uber billionaires that own these teams. Is it really important that they make money? Not that much, because they have other ventures where they make a crap ton of money, right? But what it does is gives them less excuse if they're making more money to not spend money. So, I think for the fan standpoint, that's a good thing. If they can't rely on that, there's no fans in the stands, so we can't buy players, talking points. So that's a good thing for fans, for that to be eliminated. So it'll be great when fans are allowed back. I don't think it's going to be for quite a while, though.
Yeah, I think, and I know that the Cubs have said that they believe they can be at full capacity maybe by the end of the season. How much of that is of course they want to say that, right? They want to see that ramped up. And I think we're seeing, I mean, Illinois is opening up very quickly to basically everybody who's eligible. Like, come on, let's get this done. And I know the numbers have been getting lower. We're seeing, and I think just as importantly as that, surrounding states, right? Because the Cubs don't only draw fans from Chicago and Illinois. The Cubs are a tourist attraction, for lack of a better term, and you're going to get a lot more people in there than just the 8,000 who are scheduled to be able to be at the ballpark. There'll be people around. But again, Indiana and Michigan and Wisconsin and surrounding states have also opened this up. So I think by the time we get to the summer, and we're talking about even teenagers and younger being able to get vaccinated, and we got these numbers coming down, I think capacity will increase. I'm with Brad completely on the idea of teams needing to have fans there. I think that is more of it eliminating an excuse for owners to cut, because, as we've seen, just the prospect of it, as soon as we started hearing about vaccines being approved and distribution, I don't think it's a shock that Joc Pederson's contract was announced the same day after the Johnson information came out, that it was being approved, right? Because when you don't have those excuses anymore, you kind of have to start spending some money, and that should be good for baseball as a whole, because we got to get out of this biblical loss narrative that these owners are trying to build, because guess what? They didn't have expenses last year either.
Right.
They only had to pay like a third of the salaries that they owed to these players, and they didn't have to pay nearly as much overhead on the ballpark. So I'm in favor of it, but here's the thing. To me, at the end of the day, I was out at spring training. First of all, it was awesome to be in a ballpark at only 20% capacity because there were no lines or anything. You didn't have to be around people if you didn't want to. It was great. But how awesome will it be for us to be able to get back to the people who want to be out of the ballpark, be able to do that and to enjoy a hot dog and a beer in the summer in Chicago? There's nothing better than that. So I think just for everyone's sake, kind of from a general just mental wellness, it'll be great for all players and fans and everyone to be able to enjoy that again, because whether the Cubs are good or not, I know there's a team on the south side that's supposed to be really, really good. And so that'll be, the city of Chicago needs to be able to have fans at the ballpark this year. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Now, guys, how do you think the Cubs measure up to the rest of the teams in the division? You think it's Cincy, are they finally going to get over that hump and break through? You look at Milwaukee, they're kind of where the Cubs are. You don't know where they're going. Same with, Pittsburgh, you go in total rebuild. And St. Louis, you can probably say they're the favorites at division, especially with the Arenado trade. Well, how do you think the Cubs measure up to those teams in that division? Evan, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think Milwaukee's a little bit weird because they're always that team who, all right, should they be any good? Everybody thinks they're going to kind of be in the middle of the pack. A lot of the projections they have them finishing first, or at least one of them, Pacoda, does, which I find a little bit odd. I don't know that Christian Yelich can continue to carry that team so much on his own. You do have Locaine back, but again, after missing a year, being a year older, what impact does that have? Their pitching staff is constantly one that I think overachieves. I don't buy the Brewers in terms of a 162-game season. The Pirates aren't even a Major League Baseball team. They're AAA at best, maybe. And then you've got, again, the Reds. They're kind of that team that everybody thought was going to be on the come, and yet, now you've lost your Cy Young winner. Again, that pitching isn't very scary. I think their lineup could be tough, but it is, to me, it's the Cubs and the Cardinals. The Cardinals have more margin for error when you have MVP candidates at the corners, but so do the Cubs. I think it's easy to look at the Cardinals and their kind of their shiny new toy, if you will, in Nolan Arenado, who actually, and I love this fact, they are paying Dexter Fowler more money to play for the Angels than they're paying Nolan Arenado to play for them, the Cardinals, that is, because, the Rockies just handed him $50 million and paid his entire salary for this year. But that aside, they've got – that's the shiny new toy. And Paul Goldschmidt was the shiny new toy before. But, the Cubs have got – look around that Cubs infield. You have legitimately – you have one MVP winner, an MVP second place finisher from a couple of years ago, Anthony Rizzo, who's frequently in the top 5 or 10, the second base deal we talked about, Wilson Contreras, who everybody, I think, kind of keeps sleeping on, but is easily one of the best, if not the best, he and Real Muto, catchers in the entire league. That infield alone is better top to bottom than I think you're going to find just about anywhere else outside of San Diego. The Cubs have a ton of talent. I think it's just we're sleeping on them because they haven't really performed the last couple of years as we expected. So if the Cubs play up to what they're capable of, there's no reason they can't be better than the Cardinals. However, I do think you've got some hungry players out there in St. Louis, and their pitching staff could be legit as well with Jack Flaherty and some of the others. So it's going to be tough, but I think it comes down to those two teams.
Yeah, the other thing you have with the Cardinals is Paul Goldschmidt is a year more settled in. right? I mean, last year was such an odd season to begin with. And then you add to it the first time he's changed teams as a professional in a new city, everything else. Now you got him a little settled in, and Paul Goldschmidt is another guy who is, a perennial MVP candidate. So I think the Cardinals are quite a bit better than the Cubs. However, I think the Cubs, if they get a healthy Kris Bryant, a healthy and confident Kris Bryant back, that puts them much closer and much more with a much greater chance of competing against the Cardinals. But I think the Cardinals are here, the Cubs are here, and everybody else is way down. I mean, the Reds, they've got a decent looking lineup, but again, their pitching is a mess. They lost Trevor Bauer. Sonny Gray isn't exactly healthy right now. The Reds are a mess. The Pirates, like Evan said, they shouldn't even be in Major League Baseball anymore. I mean, they're an embarrassment. Honest to God, you had a window with Andrew McCutchen, and they didn't do anything.
Yeah.
And since then, it's just been allowing the whole thing to crumble. So, Brewers are always tough, but I don't think they're on the same level as the Cubs or Cardinals.
Final moment or two with Brad Robinson and Evan Altman as we preview the 2021 Chicago Cubs, courtesy of Second City Sports and War Media, along with Lakeena McGee. I am Sidney Brown. Last question from me, fellas. I'm going to address, I avoided it, but let's address the elephant in the room, no pun intended. Of course, Kris Bryant is coming in confident this year. He's due for an extension. Javi Baez, some people say he's the face of the franchise next to Anthony Rizzo. He's due for an extension. Catcher Wilson Contreras, who was rumored to be traded the last couple of off seasons, he's still here. I'll start with you, Evan. Who stays, who goes?
I think just if we look at Javi and what he's said publicly, we had a guy who actually, had the season not been canceled when it was, he may have gotten an extension last spring. He was very close. They were in talks. I think it was yesterday or a couple days ago, he said, I don't want to be one of those guys who goes to another team and comes back and the fans all hate him and they boo him. So, and he's also the only one who has said, Anthony Rizzo has specifically said, I don't want to work anything out once the season starts. If I can get something done, it needs to be during spring. Most players are like that. Javi has said, I don't care. My agent's the one that works that out. He keeps talking with him during the season. So it feels like Javi understands as much as anyone, and we're talking about a really stacked shortstop class.
Yeah,
he's coming off a rough season. Does he want to go out and risk another maybe subpar year, knowing there's a ton of other shortstops, knowing how much value he's created in Chicago? Does he want to risk that? And he's represented by the Wasserman Group. They've worked out extensions before. They're the ones who represent Kyle Hendricks, who signed a deal previously. They actually represent Nolan Arenado, who's a sizable deal, but still he did sign an extension. So we're looking at that. I don't think he wants to test free agency. I think he'd like to lock in. I think he's there. I think we mentioned Rizzo already. Contreras a little bit different because he's got 2 years. Bryant has said all along, and this is the same thing I've been told internally, both on and off the record, that he absolutely wants to remain. However, I don't know how willing the Cubs are. With him, it's going to come down to, and Brad mentioned this, is being healthy and confident. And the confidence is a big part of it. And knowing that he can have a no-trade clause, knowing that he's got the security of being in a place for a long time. But the Cubs notoriously don't like no trades. They don't like to add that in there. And I think it's going to be very difficult. It's not exclusively about the money with Bryant, but I think finding that agreement is going to be very tough there. All of them would love to stay. It sure looks like the money is there for all of them to stay because none of these guys, the Cubs have almost nothing. If you look at the salaries beyond this year, there's a ton of room on the books.
Oh, yeah. Whole lot of room.
Yeah, like more than there should be. So Bryant's probably the least likely to sign one, and I don't think that's about his camp at all. I just think it's about how those things work out. But I'm a homer, man. I want them all to stay. So I'll let Brad be the harbinger of bad news. I'll let it all stay. Brad can be more honest about it.
Oh dear.
Oh man, you sound like my wife now.
Oh my gosh.
Wife is a much smarter person than I ever actually realized. If that's the case,
I totally agree with everything you said. I think there's no doubt that Bryant is the least likely of the bunch to sign an extension. Javi, I think that could get done. As we had talked about with Rizzo, face of the franchise and everything, and such a close relationship with ownership and the front office and everything. Contreras, I think that just depends on how the next couple seasons go, because he is so far away from free agency. But I do think, like Evan said, there's just so many other factors with Kris Bryant that there don't seem to be with the other guys that I'd say if the Cubs are struggling at the trade deadline and they're looking to unload, that's probably the guy that would be most likely to be let go, I think. But again, they could come out and have a gangbusters first half and might want to keep him around, and the Cubs might want to add. Who knows? So much depends on how these first 2 months go.
Oh my gosh, this was so much fun, you guys. And we got to do this with the Bears. I'm sure this is probably going to be even more animated than it was today. Thanks to Brad. Thanks to
Your
Brad.
Zoom is out. Your Zoom is out.
Exactly.
George McCaskey.
Exactly. We'll say that till August. Thank you so much to Brad Robinson and Evan Altman. Brad, I'll start with you. Where can people find you on the Twitter and social media?
Can find me at Brad Robinson 8.
Evan?
It's at D Evan Altman on Twitter, and you can find Cubs Insider, my website, at Real Cubs Insider on Twitter, or just search Facebook for Real Cubs or for Cubs Insider, or you can find us on YouTube as well. We're all over the place.
Excellent. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us. Again, we got to do this again, with the Bears, because, look, I'm sure, like I said, it's probably going to be even more animated, so you got to wait till August for that, folks. But thank you, guys, and enjoy the Cubs baseball. Hopefully we'll have something to celebrate.
Absolutely.
Sounds good to me. Thanks a lot for having us.
Thank you.
All right, guys.
All right.
Take care.
All right.
See you later, guys.
You guys be safe.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Once again, the Chicago Cubs open up their season on Thursday, April 1st at 1:10 p.m. in their home opener against the Pittsburgh Pirates. For you Southside fans, we haven't forgotten about you. Our 2021 Chicago White Sox preview will be coming soon. You can find it right here on YouTube at WARR Media, at WARR Media. And you can find it also on WARR on Anchor, which kicks you over to Spotify, iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play. Type in that search engine box on all podcast platforms, WARR on Anchor.
Right, and also on YouTube, though, once it's posted up on YouTube. So like, share, subscribe, tell your friends on all of this. So that's it for us today. But don't worry, we'll be back in our normal time, our normal day this weekend to talk all great things going on local and nationally, sporting wise. So for Sid, you can follow me at Keena McGee on the Twitter and at Keena_McGee on the IG. You
can follow yours truly, Sydney Brown, on the Twitter and the IG at SidKid80. Once again, at SidKid80. That's SIDKID80. That's SIDKID80. You can visit our website for more information on our podcast articles and so much more. WeAreRegalRadio.com. That's WeAreRegal Radio.com. And you can follow us on all social media platforms at WARR Media. Once again, at WARR Media. That's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Like, share, subscribe, and tell your friends. And now for Sid, I'm Lakeena. This is Second City, especially for Second City Sports. And we'll see you this weekend when we talk about other things that are going on around the sporting world. So be safe, everybody. Till next time, holla!